Welcome to today's deep dive. We're really thrilled you're joining us because our mission today is to unpack a truly chilling piece of storytelling.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a dark one.
It really is. So we're diving into some script excerpts and
Yeah.
scene descriptions from this incredibly gritty, hyper-realistic webtoon. It's titled The Eternal Inferno of Tower 7.
And specifically, we're looking at story 5, the Crown Fire at Midnight, right?
Right, exactly. Story 5. And, usually when you consume a survival story, there's an underlying equation we all subconsciously trust.
Yeah, the classic setup.
Exactly. You have a threat, like a sinking ship or, I don't know, a wild animal, and then you have human action. You calculate your options, you implement a plan, and the universe sort of acts as a neutral stage to see if you pull it off.
Right, the universe doesn't care; it just lets you try.
Yeah. But today we're looking at a narrative landscape that entirely shatters that equation.
It really does. I mean, the premise here immediately strips away any illusion of a fair fight.
It's just brutal from the jump.
Completely. We are stationed with this character, Warden Miller. He's a 55-year-old man wearing this standard issue green Forest Service jacket, and he is entirely alone.
Just totally isolated.
Yeah, trapped inside an isolated, glass-walled fire lookout tower.
Mm-hmm.
And this tower is perched on a rocky peak at an elevation of 8,000 feet.
Which is just so high up.
It is. And it's a space that it manages to feel intensely claustrophobic, despite offering this, 360-degree view of endless open wilderness.
Yeah, that juxtaposition is wild. And here is the big aha moment that elevates this from just a tense disaster narrative into an absolute masterpiece of psychological horror.
The twist, yeah.
We aren't just watching a man try to survive a catastrophic forest fire. We are actually trapped in a time loop with him.
Which just changes everything.
It changes the whole genre. Miller has died in this exact fire, inside this exact glass cage, just countless times.
Over and over again.
Right. But the true brilliance of what the author pulls off here, and, what we're going to explore with you today, is how the comic uses two completely distinct, conflicting narrative voices to build this feeling of absolute, inescapable doom for the reader.
Yeah, the author establishes this really suffocating tone right from the opening sequence.
You feel it immediately.
You really do.
Right.
Because instead of relying solely on Warden Miller's internal monologue, the script employs this dual narrative framework. We have what the text explicitly labels the scenario voice.
Oh, that voice is so creepy.
It is, and that runs concurrently with Miller's voice.
Yeah.
And the contrast between the two is just striking.
I really want to spend some time on this contrast, actually, because it basically dictates the entire emotional weight of the comic.
Oh, absolutely.
The script describes the scenario voice as elevated, distant, and completely indifferent. It doesn't sound human at all.
Right, it's like a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like the raw, uncaring force of nature itself. Meanwhile, Miller's voice, which the author grimly labels the ghost, by the way.
Which is such a dark detail.
It's so dark. His voice is gruff, gravelly, and just bone-tired. It reads like a man who is actively fighting a war he knows he lost. Like, a long time ago.
Think about the sensory details the author uses to introduce us to this dynamic, too.
Oh, the opening panels.
Yeah, at the very beginning of the loop, the time is 11:45 p.m. The visuals are incredibly dark and evocative. Miller is just sitting slumped at the central alidade mapping table.
Just waiting.
Just waiting. And outside, there is this 360-degree view of endless black pine trees under a starless sky.
Pitch black.
Exactly. Inside, the only illumination comes from a small, green glowing desk lamp and the harsh red LEDs of a digital weather clock just burning in the shadows.
And, the sensory details extend way beyond just the visuals. Miller specifically notes the smell in the room.
Oh, right, the ozone.
Yes. Pine, old coffee, and ozone. Ozone is such a loaded detail to include there.
It really is. It's that sharp, almost metallic scent.
Yeah, the one that hits the air right before a massive electrical storm touches down. Psychologically, smelling ozone means the atmosphere is literally charged with violence that hasn't happened yet.
It's pure anticipation.
Exactly. And the script pairs that smell with a description of Miller's eyes, noting they carry and I love this quote, ash-gray weight of 1,000 identical deaths.
Such phenomenal writing.
He feels the storm in his teeth. He knows exactly what is coming.
And while Miller is internally processing that paralyzing dread, this scenario voice is just floating above the scene, completely detached from his suffering.
It doesn't care.
Not even a little. It coldly states the geographical facts. It says, elevation, 8,000 feet. Isolation is absolute.
Wow.
The clock strikes 11:45 p.m. The air is entirely too still. It provides this clinical assessment of a situation that is emotionally devastating to the protagonist.
I was actually trying to pinpoint how to describe the feeling of reading these two voices side by side because it is incredibly unsettling.
It's a hard feeling to nail down.
It is. But imagine you are driving a car toward a collapsed bridge.
Okay.
The scenario voice is like your GPS navigation system. It calmly, mathematically tells you to, proceed forward for 500 feet, speaking in this pleasant automated tone.
Right.
While you are in the driver's seat, screaming, furiously pumping the brakes, knowing you are about to go over the edge.
That is a perfect analogy.
The GPS isn't malicious, right? But its total indifference to your impending death makes the situation feel profoundly lonely.
And that analogy really highlights the core mechanism of the horror here. Because normally, the horror genre relies on a sliver of hope.
You want the hero to win.
Right. The reader is encouraged to root for the protagonist to find a loophole or, outsmart the threat.
Ah,
However, by establishing the scenario voice as a structural pillar of the comic, the author immediately strips away any hope of a resolution.
it's just gone.
It functions almost like a localized dark god. It establishes the rules of this universe as thoroughly apathetic. It doesn't hate Warden Miller. It simply does not care if he exists.
And by placing that monumental indifference right next to Miller's intimate, bone-deep exhaustion, the comic kind of forces the reader to confront the pointlessness of the struggle.
They really feel it.
You do. You feel Miller's fatigue because the universe itself, via that scenario voice, is assuring you that his suffering won't change the outcome.
Which brings us to the actual catalyst of the loop.
Oh.
The moment the static dread shifts into active terror.
Oh man, 11.48.
Yep. 3 minutes later, at 11:48 p.m., the silence is broken. The imagery shifts dramatically as a jagged, impossibly thick bolt of silent, blue-white lightning strikes a massive dead pine.
On Ridge 4.
Right. Exactly, a location designated as Ridge 4.
And the dual narration does heavy lifting during this spark. The scenario voice refers to the lightning strike as a silent, violent execution.
Such a powerful phrase.
It really is. It notes that 1,000,000 volts have found a dead husk of timber, and it includes one vital, crushing detail. There is no accompanying rain to offer mercy.
And the lack of rain is critical here.
Because of the dry lightning.
Yeah, it creates a dry lightning scenario, which is an absolute worst-case condition for a forest fire. And Miller understands the implications immediately.
He's a veteran warden. He knows.
Exactly. His internal monologue states, in a normal world, I'd call it in, but this isn't a normal world anymore. He acknowledges that standard operating procedures are just completely useless.
Yet, almost immediately after acknowledging how futile it is, Miller defies his own logic.
Right. He goes for the radio.
Yeah. We see this tight, high-contrast close-up of him gripping the black plastic receiver of his ham radio. His knuckles are white. He is screaming into the microphone, yelling, "Mayday! Base! This is Tower 7.
And the frequency, of course, offers nothing but a void.
Just dead air.
The visual representation of the radio's digital display just shows flickering, jagged, red, static lines. It's this perfect visual manifestation of a severed connection.
And Miller's reasoning for grabbing the radio in the first place is deeply tragic. He reveals, "I try it every time, just to prove I still have a voice, but the loop cuts the lines. It wants me alone." I really want to pause on that specific phrase. It wants me alone.
Yeah, that's a huge shift.
It is. He is no longer viewing the time loop as just some glitch in the universe. He's beginning to personify his captivity. He actually believes the loop has a distinct desire to isolate him before it kills him.
And the escalation from that point is terrifyingly fast. I mean, by 11:52 p.m., just 4 minutes after the lightning strike, the fire undergoes this massive mutation.
It moves so fast.
The script describes a panoramic view of the destruction as the fire crowns.
Let's actually explain what a crown fire entails for anyone listening who might not know, because it's a very specific nightmarish phenomenon in forestry.
That's the worst-case scenario.
Right. A crown fire means the flames are no longer just consuming the dry brush and undergrowth on the forest floor. The fire has actually climbed the trunks and reached the very tops of the trees, the canopy.
And once it's up there,
Yeah, once it is in the canopy, it leaps from treetop to treetop, fueled by the wind and the intense thermal updrafts. It moves with a speed that is almost incomprehensible.
the comic illustrates that speed with ruthless efficiency, too. I mean, the fire covers 2 miles of timber in those 4 minutes.
2 miles in
Yeah.
4 minutes.
Yeah. The scenario voice describes the advancing inferno riding the canopy like a, quote, tidal wave of pure heat, racing uphill directly toward Miller's isolated glass box.
So the threat isn't just a distant problem anymore.
No, it is an immediate, insurmountable physical force.
And then the narrative forces Miller into what is arguably the most agonizing sequence of the entire loop.
Oh, the trapdoor.
Yes, the cool green light of the tower's desk lamp is entirely swallowed by this hellish, pulsating orange glare bleeding through the glass. Miller drops to the floorboards. He frantically grabs the heavy iron handle of a trapdoor built into the floor of the lookout.
Because beneath that door is a 70-foot steel staircase.
Right, leading down to the jagged rocks of the mountain peak. It is literally his only physical avenue of escape.
But the physics of the structure work entirely against him. Well, the tower is essentially functioning like a massive chimney. The 70-foot steel staircase below is acting as a superheated flue, funneling all that rising heat directly up to the trapdoor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By the time Miller even touches the iron ring, it is glowing a dull cherry red from the ambient temperature alone.
The art direction described in the script here is physically painful to read.
You can almost feel the heat.
You really can. Wavy distortion lines radiate from the iron door, indicating this extreme heat.
Yeah.
When Miller grabs the ring, the smoke immediately blisters his palms. His face is pulled back in a silent scream.
It's brutal.
But what really anchors this scene is the internal monologue right before he touches the burning metal. Miller says, "I didn't try the door last time. I just stood there. This time I'm running."
Such a fascinating detail.
Okay, so this is where I really trip up on the internal logic of a character trapped in a time loop.
Right. Why do it?
Exactly. We know Miller remembers everything. He knows he has died thousands of times. He knows the fire is moving way too fast for the stairs to be viable. So why subject himself to the excruciating pain of third-degree burns on his hands just to open a door he knows won't save him? I mean, why run?
It's a great question. And to understand why he grabs that burning handle, we have to look at the psychological concept of learned helplessness, and specifically how the author actively subverts it to maximize the horror.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, learned helplessness occurs when a subject is repeatedly exposed to an unavoidable negative stimulus.
Yeah.
Eventually, the brain just gives up.
It stops trying.
Right. The subject stops trying to escape, even if a new viable exit is presented, because they have deeply internalized that their actions cannot change the outcome.
So, by that logic, Miller should just sit quietly in his chair and wait for the fire.
He should.
Because the loop has proven to him over and over that he can't win.
Exactly. But human survival instincts are incredibly difficult to fully override, especially when triggered by a primal threat, like a wall of fire consuming oxygen.
The body just reacts.
Yeah, the author knows that. Miller's brain is fighting a literal war between the logical memory of 1,000 deaths and the biological imperative to flee heat.
Wow.
The true cruelty of this narrative is that the environment actively punishes his biological instinct for agency.
It weaponizes his own human nature against him.
Exactly.
If he gives in to the instinct to run, he just finds a new, highly specific way to suffer before the inevitable end.
And listen to how the scenario voice frames his attempt to escape. It says, the exit is welded shut by 1,000 degrees of raw heat.
Welded shut.
The universe isn't just ignoring his effort, it is actively blocking it. Miller realizes this, noting through the pain that the universe is closing the exits. It's forcing me back up. It wants me at the window.
The illusion of choice in this time loop doesn't offer a path to salvation at all. It merely provides the protagonist with an agonizing menu of ways to fail.
That's a grim way to put it, but it's true.
And that concept that the illusion of choice only results in bespoke forms of agony, that perfectly transitions us to the climax of the loop.
Yeah, the envelopment.
Having exhausted his physical options and severely burned his hands, Miller retreats from the trapdoor. He backs against the far wall of the tower. It is 11:58 p.m.
Just 10 minutes later.
We are only 10 minutes into the timeline, and the physical space is about to undergo an absolute erasure.
And the visual description of the tower interior at 11:58 p.m. induces a profound sense of claustrophobia. The entire room is cast in this blinding, incandescent orange light.
It's everywhere.
Beyond the thick, hurricane-tempered glass walls, there is no sky, no mountain, no forest. There's only a solid, swirling wall of fire pressing against the panes.
And Miller describes the sound of this envelopment as a, quote, freight train parked inside my skull.
The noise would be deafening.
The physics of the situation are just overwhelming. The fire is consuming oxygen at such a massive rate that it is literally sucking the air out of the valley, pulling it right out of Miller's lungs even before the glass breaks.
And speaking of the glass, the thermal shock is so extreme at this point that the hurricane-tempered panes are actually bending inward.
Bend.
Yeah, cracking with these jagged white lines across the panoramic view.
And the language the author uses throughout this climax is very deliberate. The fire is not treated as just a natural consequence of lightning and dry timber. It is treated as an entity.
It has agency.
That was one of the most striking elements of the script for me. The personification of the fire fundamentally changes the tone from a disaster story to, like, a monster movie.
Oh, for sure.
The text refers to the fire as an executioner. It describes how the inferno breathes and how it inhales the oxygen.
And the scenario voice, that cold scientific narrator, abandons its meteorological tone entirely and explicitly states that the fire disobeys physics as it feeds and mutates into a monster around the tower.
Which is terrifying. And transforming the fire into a malicious actor serves a very specific psychological purpose, right?
It does, because when a disaster is natural, it is tragic, but it is ultimately neutral. A hurricane doesn't hate the town it floods.
Right.
But by personifying the crown fire, the author gives Miller an active antagonist. It makes the destruction feel targeted and vindictive.
Like it has it out for him personally.
Yes. This makes the horror significantly more potent because it implies that the universe isn't just indifferent, it is actively hostile.
And that hostility reaches its absolute peak precisely at 11:59 p.m. The glass violently shatters inward. But it doesn't just break. The intense heat turns the thick panes into thousands of glowing, molten projectiles.
Just filling the room.
The fire detonates into the confined space of the tower. But the scenario voice makes a really fascinating word choice here. It doesn't say the fire burns the room. It states that the fire erases it.
And erasure implies a complete removal from existence, not just a chemical reaction. It claims the air, the structural steel, the mapping table, and the man, all in a fraction of a second. It leaves nothing behind to prove they were ever there.
Miller's final thought before this physical erasure is deeply haunting. As the molten glass and fire flood the room, he thinks, "This is the part that lasts forever, the moment the heat touches the bone."
God.
I really want you, the listener, to try and imagine carrying that specific memory in your mind, knowing exactly how long a fraction of a second can stretch when your body is literally being consumed.
It is a graphically horrific culmination of the tension, but from a narrative standpoint, the graphic death isn't actually the true climax of the story.
Right, it's what comes next.
The mind-bending tragedy lies in the immediate aftermath of that erasure.
The pacing of the script here is just brilliant. Following the chaotic detonation of the room, the next scene is a total blackout.
Panel 9.
Yes, panel 9. The visual noise stops entirely. The script describes a silent snowfall of glowing orange and gray ash floating in an absolute void.
It's so quiet.
And the scenario voice chimes in, noting that the fuel is spent and the mountain is left to the suffocating silence. It really feels like an ending.
But then the page turns, and we are presented with the reset.
And the reset is a gut punch. We get an exact, pixel-perfect replication of the very first scene.
Panel 10 is panel 1.
Yes. The hyper-realistic, dim interior of the tower, the small, green-glowing desk lamp, Warden Miller, in his green jacket, sitting slumped at the central mapping table, perfectly, physically untouched by the inferno that literally just erased him.
And the clock.
The digital clock burning in the shadows once again reads 11:45 p.m.
And the scenario voice, resuming its role as the cold architect of this nightmare, just announces the mechanics of the loop. It says, the ashes gather themselves, the smoke reverses, the glass rebuilds its cage.
And then we get Miller's voice. He repeats the exact same internal monologue from the beginning, but now the reader has the agonizing context of what those words truly mean.
Because we've seen what happens.
Exactly. He notes the time, 11:45 p.m. He notes the smell of pine, old coffee, and ozone. He states that the storm hasn't broken yet, and he finishes with, "But I know exactly where the lightning is going to strike."
The author isolates the true horror of the time loop in that final line. The tragedy isn't just that Miller is forced to repeat the scenario.
No.
The tragedy is that his memory is entirely preserved.
That's the worst part.
It is. He remembers the excruciating pain of the cherry-red iron ring blistering his palms. He remembers the deafening freight train roar of the glass shattering inward. He remembers the sensation of the heat touching his bones.
Every single detail.
He is physically restored to his original state, sure, but psychologically the weight of that trauma compounds with every single iteration.
So why does this specific structural execution work so well? Why does reading a script about a time loop hit us harder than, say, just watching one on screen?
It's a very specific feeling.
It is, and I think it fundamentally comes down to the medium of the comic book itself. The author uses the physical constraints of the page to perfectly mirror Miller's psychological nightmare. Think about the architecture of a comic. It is literally a series of boxes. The panels are cages for the characters.
Right, and the reader's eye is forced to move through these enclosed spaces in a rigid sequence.
Exactly. You read from box to box, left to right, moving forward through the timeline. But then the author forces you to look at an image at the end of the story that perfectly identically loops back to the image at the beginning.
Panel 10, throwing you back to panel 1.
Yes. As a reader, you physically experience the trap. The structure of the page traps your eyes in the exact same way the glass box traps Miller. It induces this powerful sense of empathy because you are literally forced to re-enter the cage alongside him.
It's an incredibly sophisticated alignment of form and function. I mean, the medium itself becomes the mechanism for the dread.
It really is a masterclass in utilizing the format. And, well, as we wrap up our analysis of Ward and Miller's Endless Night, it leaves me with a lingering, provocative thought. Something I really want you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
There's definitely a lot to think about.
We analyzed how Miller tried the trapdoor during this specific loop. He explicitly remembered that he just stood there during the last iteration, so he consciously changed his tactic. He allowed his survival instinct to override his learned helplessness, and he burned his hands trying to find a new way out, testing the boundaries of the cage.
He sought an exit the universe had already welded shut.
Right. So if Miller remembers the pain of every previous loop, and he specifically remembers which escape routes he has already tried and failed, what happens when he completely runs out of variables?
Wow, yeah.
Does the loop eventually break when he exhausts every single possible human action? Is there some secret mathematical combination of movements that finally satisfies the universe and lets him die permanently?
Or does he just
Yeah.
stop?
Exactly. Or is the ultimate unimaginable horror that his human mind will eventually outlast his hope? Will he reach a point, maybe 1,000 loops from now, maybe 1,000,000, where he simply stops grabbing the ham radio, stops running for the blistering trapdoor, and spends eternity just sitting in the dark, smelling the ozone, waiting in absolute paralysis for 11:48 p.m.?
When the biological imperative to survive is finally crushed and the illusion of choice is entirely exhausted, all that remains is the waiting. That is a deeply, deeply unsettling reality to consider.
It fundamentally upends how we consume these narratives. We want our survival stories to give us a fair fight. We want the equation to balance out. Threat plus human action equals a chance at agency.
But Tower 7 just doesn't care.
The eternal inferno of Tower 7 strips all the math away. It locks you in a glass box at 8,000 feet, hands you a radio that only broadcasts the static of your own isolation, and forces you to realize that sometimes, no matter how hard you fight against the script, the fire is still coming. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and perhaps take a moment to appreciate the rain a little bit more tonight.